right, welcome back to the channel, everyone. I am thrilled to be joined by Mr. Mike Shackle, the author of the Last War trilogy I have right here. On my 10 top trilogies of all time, I absolutely had a great time with this. It was a little dark. It was a little realistic. It had characters that would suck you in. It had characters that would repulse you. It has everything you want on an amazing journey, a fantastical journey. And if you haven't picked it up, hang out with us, get to know this amazing, talented author. We're going to stay spoiler-free talking about this. So you can kind of find out if you think it would be your vibe or if you think you want to try it. And I can almost guarantee you, you absolutely do want to try it. So Mike Shackle, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me so much today.
It's a real, well, after that build-up, I'm quite speechless and touched. No, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to chatting.
Oh, but this is such a thrill for me. I've been looking forward to this a long time. I'm so glad we finally got it straightened out. I wanted to do it when we first read this, and then things, life is going to happen, but we're finally together. So I just want to dive right in. We usually ask every guest the same question to start these off with, and I really want to know your answer to this. Normally, when someone spends their life becoming a storyteller, it's like a calling, and it comes to them sometime in their life, and there's something hits them, something happens, and they choose that road less traveled to be a storyteller. Do you remember that moment when it hit you that this is what you had to do?
It's funny, I was thinking about this the other day. When I was a kid, 7, 8, all the way up to when I left school, all I wanted to do was write stories and draw comic books and all that kind of stuff. And that kind of desire got educated out of me to a point, because where I was at school, they weren't really into creativity. It was all about what were you going to do next and what career were you going into, and it was all very, very serious. So I had some teachers when I was early on who supported me. I wrote a story about this futuristic warrior called the Ultra Warrior, and my English teacher published it in the school magazine. And all these parents complained about how violent it was and how they shouldn't be encouraging it. But he was like, no, it's a great story, and I need to recognize that. So I always remember him. But from then on, it was much more about, people like me don't do creative jobs like being a writer. What are you going to go into in business? How are you going to be serious and all that kind of stuff? So I started working in advertising. And then I've always read, and I love books of every genre going, and I kept having these ideas for stories bubbling away in the back of my mind, and I didn't really know how to start it. And I actually found these notebooks where I'd written down the story structure of Star Wars and The Matrix, and trying to work out, was there a formula I could follow. And then someone I knew wrote a book, and they kept sending it to me to beta read and give them feedback. And it was terrible. It was it was just the most badly written book that didn't get better the more they rewrote it. And I kept trying to be nice and supportive and not just say, this is terrible. And I was complaining about it to my girlfriend at the time, who then became my wife. And she said, yeah, but they've written a book. How many times have I heard you say you want to write something and you haven't done it? So it might be bad, but they've done it.
They've hit the finish line.
Yeah. And that really was this kind of like, oh my God, I do want to do this. So I sat down and I started trying to write a book. And the first book I wrote, the first draft, it didn't have any female characters in it at all. It was all sort of macho men, doing manly things and fighting monsters. And I had to sort of go back and rewrite that. And I worked on it for about 2.5 years. And then I just kept going. I sent it off to agents, got good feedback. People liked it, but it wasn't quite good enough. Wrote another book, got an agent who wanted to work with me on something else because he said what I'd written wasn't commercial. And it just went from there. And then I lost the agent because I was, not good enough. And it got to this point where I'd written 3 novels, and I just had all these lovely rejections of people going, "This is great, but," um, and I just got married and I had young kids, and I just thought, is this really what I want to spend my time doing if I'm not going to level up to where I want to be? And I heard an interview with Joe Abercrombie,
Mm.
and he a very Joe quote. They said, "Have you got any advice for writers?" And he said, "Well, the longer you dance naked in the rain, the better the chance you have of being hit by lightning." I I thought
That is such a Joe Abercrombie quote.
but it's right. You know,
Yeah.
by giving up, I could guarantee I could never achieve what I wanted to do. But if I kept dancing in the rain, there was
Hmm.
that chance that lightning would hit. So I sat down, I wrote out this list of things that I loved and what I wanted to write about. And I wrote this line about skull-faced warriors kicking your door in, coming to drag you away. And I just really liked how that felt. I liked the vibe
Hmm.
from it. So I started trying to build the world out, and I started thinking about an occupied country in World War II and what that must have been like. And there was stuff going on in the world where I thought all the bad guys had won.
Mm.
And I couldn't see where the heroes that were going to come through and save us. And to be honest, I still feel that today. But that got me thinking that I'd never read a book where the bad guy had won,
Hmm.
and what was going to happen to them people next. So all these things were all sort of merging around in my head. And then it was around Remembrance Day, and I read a poem called In Flanders Fields. And there's a line in that where it says, "We are the dead who," and I should know this off by heart now, I don't, but it's basically, the sun used to shine on our faces, and now we hand the torch over to you. And again, that just, again, it was like the universe was sending me all these lovely ideas to
Yes.
feed it
Yes.
into it. And then the first draft I wrote, Tinstra, who's one of the main characters, was this wise cracking Han Solo type rebel leader, and I just couldn't write it. It was just boring and annoying, and I kept redoing it. And then I thought, well, what would I be like in that situation? And I think we all would like to believe that we would be a hero and would go out and
Sure.
do the
Sure.
right
Yeah.
thing. But I also think that I'd be hiding in a cupboard, hoping that everyone would just drive on by and leave me alone. If I could just be invisible, I could get away with it. So yeah, and then the moment I thought that, everything then, she became a breeze to write. And then the other characters really were all based to balance off each other. So if Tinstra hated being involved, I wanted a bad guy who just loved it. Who
Hmm.
this was his dream. And I thought, well, what would be the nicest magical power anyone could have? Which is obviously to heal and cure any wounds and sickness and things like that. And I thought, well, what would a psychopath do with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just sort of rolled on from there, and just all these people sort of materialized in my mind, and that was We Are the Dead, really.
Wow. There's a couple things you said that struck me. I'd like to ask a follow-up a little bit. You said people like me don't do that,
Yeah,
don't write, don't have an artistic
yeah.
journey or a life. What did that mean? Your background, your family
No,
background? What were you talking about?
I just think, I think when you look at any creative field, whether it's actors, whether it's musicians, I think as someone who looks onto it as a fan, everyone seems quite special and quite different. You
Touched,
know,
otherworldly,
yeah,
almost.
there's a bit
Yeah.
of magic about them and things like that. And being a very avid book fan, I've gone to conventions and I've sat watching panels of people speaking, and it's very easy to think I belong here in the audience, um,
Mm.
and not one of them. And I think particularly when I was younger, um, I had conversations with people where they were like, "But you need to earn a living. What are you going to do for a job, right?
Sure, sure.
Stop being a child and daydreaming. What's and there's that kind of push always to go and be serious. When we're
Hmm.
children, if someone asks you what you want to do, you want to be an astronaut, you want to be a fireman, you want to be a comic book artist, you want to, like, there isn't any limit to your ambition.
Yeah,
But
you're completely allowed to play and dream. Yeah,
as we get through, everyone goes, all right, well, that's great for a dream, but now let's be realistic. And I think that really kind of stopped me from doing it earlier. And I had a great job in advertising. I loved it and I had a lot of fun. So, that kind of distracted me as well.
And the other thing that you said that struck me out, and I hear this so many times when I ask this question, it is a teacher. It's oftentimes it is that educator, that teacher that lights the fire, that gives permission, And I just think that's so amazing that I hear that so many times. The
Yeah,
importance of that.
I remember being, and again, I was probably 7 or 8, so that's how much it struck with me. But I remember one English lesson. We walked in, he'd drawn this map on the blackboard, and it was like, right, this is the world you're in, write a story, and just gave us a couple of pointers. But I just remember staring at this land, just thinking, wouldn't that be, what could be going on? And as you sort of go through it all, and whether it's a teacher or whether it's someone in your life, you need supporters to cheer you along while you do this. And
Absolutely.
that becomes even more important as you go along, because writing is a very lonely, time-consuming business. So you need other people around you who go, actually, I really enjoy this, and you should keep going.
Sure.
And I've been lucky like that. I've had those people in my life, particularly over the last 10 years or so.
Beautiful. You said there that you would found yourself in the audience at cons. You'd been a fan. You felt, you were on this side. Can you share with us some of those works that really were lightning in a bottle to you, that made you want to do this on your own, like certain authors, certain works that hit you?
Yeah, when I was growing up, I was reading a lot of fantasy and science fiction. My grandmother, who was a wonderful woman, came with me to see Star Wars for the first time, and I remember going up to her house. She had a bookcase on the sort of second landing, and she said, "Well, if you enjoyed Star Wars, you should read this." And she gave me Edgar Rice Burroughs' *A Princess of Mars*.
Yes.
So I read all the John Carter books, and then she gave me Tarzan, and then I moved on to Conan and Elric and all these kind of things. And then again, probably around my teenage years, I started reading more thrillers and detective novels and Agatha Christie and all that kind of stuff. And then I was living in Singapore, and I was walking through this bookshop, and I saw the cover to Peter Brett's The Warded Man, or The Painted Man it is in the US. And the cover just stopped me, and I thought, wow, that looks interesting. I bought it, read it, devoured it. It was like someone had written a book just for me. It was like everything I loved was suddenly in this novel. And that was at the time when Joe Abercrombie was starting to become big. Scott Lynch had just had a couple of books out, Patrick Rothfuss. And I suddenly started devouring all these fantasy books again. And then I discovered a collection of David Gemmell's Draenei stories. So I then read all his books. It just became this sort of ferocious addiction that just blew my mind. And each one then led on to another author that I loved and got excited about.
You know what I love about that, and the link I see to your own work is that you all started where, I remember, Deja Thoris, and I remember all that,
I remember
starting
Deja
out.
Thoris.
Oh yeah, starting out there as well, right?
Yeah.
But then when we get a little bit older and we start to find Scott Lynch and Joe Abercrombie and these people you mentioned, it's like the characters move away from archetypes and icons into true three-dimensional people with issues and motivations that they have to overcome those issues. And I see so much of that in your own work. So when you say that spoke to you, I can just absolutely see a through line.
Yeah, well, we all stand on the shoulder of giants, as the expression
That's the
goes.
same.
But
Yeah, for sure.
but I used to move around a lot with my job, and I was living in New York, and it was the New York Comic Con, and Joe Abercrombie was doing a signing. So I said to my wife, I've got to go down there. I've got these books. I want him to sign them. And it started at 10 o'clock in the morning. I got there like half an hour early, staked out where it was going to be. And there just wasn't anyone around. Right.
Really?
Well, and again, this is when he was just starting to become
Yeah.
popular. Anyway, so 10 o'clock comes along and he turns up, and I'm literally the first one in the queue. And I'm like, oh, can you sign my books? And to Mike, he signs them away. And he looks up and he goes, oh, by your accent, you're not from around here. And I'm like, no,
Right.
no, I'm British as well. And he goes, oh, that's good. And I went, oh, well, thank you. Picked up the books and just basically ran off. And I left my wife standing there. And Joe looked at her and he said, I would have had a chat if he wanted to. There isn't anyone else around. We could have
For
chatted.
sure.
And she just looked at him and she went, I know, but it's just so embarrassing. I'm sorry. I walked off. And then she told me, I'm like, I can't go back now. I can't.
How could you go back? Yeah. Oh, I would have had to.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, you said you saw Star Wars and then you went up to that second landing. Was
Yeah.
that first lightning of that first hit of the fantastical for you, or Star Wars, like so many others?
I was in the UK. They printed Marvel comics in black and white every week, and I was buying and reading those from a very early age. Marvel was, well, as you can tell, still is.
There's no reason to ask if you're a Marvel or DC guy.
Yeah.
You answer that right away.
But it just blew my mind, these stories and Jack Kirby's art and John Buscema and all this kind of stuff. So that's where that love came from. But Star Wars is, and again, I remember going to the cinema. I know exactly who I was with that night.
Yeah.
Everything about it just was amazing.
Yeah.
And I got my dad to take me a second time, and then anyone who was going to see it, I would tag along and
Sure.
go and see it. And obviously in those days you only had the cinema to and I bought the record and I had the chewing gum trading cards and the action figures, and I became completely obsessed at that point.
I can still see the cover of the LP, the soundtrack. I from my stack of records that I had as well.
Yeah. And that was just everything to me.
Yeah, same. I mean, what an amazing doorway to go through. I want to segue a little bit into your work. And like I say, I started to see that through line a little bit. And I did pick up on something you mentioned a little bit earlier when all these ideas were coming to you that started to become We Are the Dead. And one of them was, what would an occupied country, World War II, what would that do to the people? And one of the things I see that is so amazingly striking in your work for me, because I look for it in work, Mike, is that amazing funhouse social mirror where I can recognize in this fantasy land and in these things happening dramatic moments of strife from my own history, place, and time that I know so well. And just from you saying that, is that something that is important to you, that is planned? Talk to me about that, because it's so prevalent in your work.
Yeah, and I think the sad thing about the world at the moment is it's not in history anymore. It's going on all around the place, and I just thought, if I was going to write a book, where all the heroes are dead and it was about real people, it had to be realistic in all its horror. And I read a lot of books about the resistance in France during World War II, and things like that. And so, I think I always struggle with world building. I know there's an author called Justin Cool who spent 16 years building his world and knew everything that happened for millennia. And I'm not like that. I'm very much, it's almost like a movie set or a stage set. I know what's happening in that scene. And what kind of buildings do I need and things like that. And the first time I worry about what the money's called is when someone needs to get a coin out.
It's when someone's buying something.
So I'm very much on that kind of side of the world building. But looking at history and bringing in influences allows it to immediately be real, and kept me very true to what was going on. So it really was the occupation of France during World War II. There was a lot of Japanese, Chinese border skirmishes and animosity and things like that were coming through as well. So yeah, it really was a mishmash, but I wanted it to feel real, and I wanted people to be scared. And I had this rule that no one was safe, and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't
Mm-hmm.
matter if they were my favorite character, if they were top billing, if the time came they had to die, they were going to die. And I think that you can feel that through the books as well, that no one is safe at any moment, and even when things are working out really well, it's something that easily could happen that just
Yeah.
knocks them to one side.
Yes, absolutely. I love the world building right away for me, just gave me that. Oh, it's hard to explain. It's like when you pick up, you're going to get the reference. I don't know if anyone else listening to me will, but you pick up that ViewMaster and as you're raising it to your
Yeah,
face, you see the two images and then they come
yeah,
together. And it's that when I start your book, it's that for me because
yeah.
I see the Great Wall of China.
Mm,
And then the images slide together at the beginning of book one.
mm,
I can see these areas of strife, Ireland and the Troubles, France, occupied
yeah,
France, Middle East of today. And then when it sinks together, you have that catharsis of, oh, this is important. These are real
mm,
people
mm.
going through something that sucks you in even deeper. And as you were saying a little bit earlier, I would hide in the cupboard. We all want to be a hero, but we think we'd hide in the cupboard while everything rolled by.
Yeah.
Uh, You know, these are those people called by destiny at that moment to stand up and
Mm.
be a hero, even though they're very, very real people with every Achilles heel and feet of clay. And it's just such an amazing ride I commend you, my friend, for pulling that off so adeptly.
Oh, thank you. I think the trouble, because everyone wants escapism, so we want to read about heroes, and even Logan Nine Fingers might be, psychopathic, schizophrenic, whatever, but we still enjoy him wading in with his sword and hacking people
Sure.
to bits. Um, but I just want to do something that felt different, where you got that kind of intensity of battle and the whims of fate that really hold you and keep you alive, or send you down into the mud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough balancing act, and a lot of my characters aren't very likable because they don't start off in that shining light area, but by the time they've gone through the journey,
Mm-hmm.
you know, hopefully you're crying with them at the end, and
Yes.
you
Yes.
really care about them.
I mean, let's talk about some of your characters. Again, we're staying spoiler free, everyone. No one click off. Let's talk about some of these characters because I love this. As we've talked about, I get that that cultural influence that I love when I'm looking at a
Mm,
fantasy world. And these characters are so real and so three dimensional when you put them in this danger zone of what could be a real world, right? I mean, let's start with the character you mentioned, Tinstra. And
mm,
I was stunned that you said early on or in your first book or something, you hadn't written any women characters because one of the things I was going to say I think you do so well is write
mm,
female characters with layers of what's going on, and this character Tinstra starting off has not the Han Solo type character, has
mm,
had horrible defeats that she has to overcome and is quite low when destiny calls her to stand up, right? And just all those layers and those dimensions going on. And for each of the characters, it's so true. We've got someone, I mean, a bit of a street urchin kind of character that is going to be called upon. We've got just a regular mother.
mm.
What does motherhood become when you're occupied and the one thing is family to protect? All of these
Yeah.
actual characters in this reality. Talk to me about when you started whittling those and crafting those.
Without sounding insane, some of them just no, but some of them just pop up, and looking back now,
Sure.
it's kind of hard remembering where they came from, and I can kind of post rationalize it. So if you had, you got Tinstra, who's the coward, you've got Darius the Chosen, who's this gleeful, psychopathic bad guy who just hurts people.
Yeah.
And then you've got Dren, the street urchin, who's
Right.
just an
And what a great point of view as all this occupation rolls in. What a great point of view that Drin has of this happening.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
but he just came across again someone who was just so angry and so hurt and so let down by the system, as it
Mm-hmm.
were, and he's striking back at everyone,
Mm-hmm.
as much as he's striking back at the bad guys. And he's this sort of force of nature, and then you have Jax, who's he's lost his arm and he's a general in an army, and he's used to discipline and he's used to winning, and
An
now
actual hero.
and
You qualify him as an actual
yeah,
hero.
and now he's just
Yeah.
lost everything and he's hiding in a carpet shop and
Yeah.
trying to get by. So again, Dren and him are great balancing, because you got the fury of youth and that kind of battered down by experience and weariness
Seen it
that
all.
comes from it.
Seen it all. Yeah.
And then really, Tinstra is a very selfish character. She's all about me, me, me. I have to protect me.
Mm-hmm.
So Yaz came along really as someone who didn't have that choice to be selfish. She's got a kid. She has to do whatever she can to protect him. And I think every parent knows that feeling.
Oh, immediately.
So
Yeah.
again, it's like, okay, so you're going to have to take a job you hate, because you've got to earn money and put food on the table. You're going to put up with whatever abuse comes, but how can we push that really far?
Sure.
What is the line you're going to say? I'm not going to do that for the safety of my child.
Sure. It
Um,
starts out as someone just trying to get by, taking the job, trying to get food on the table, hiding in the cupboard, as it
yeah,
were. And then these character arcs, these journeys of all these characters are so rich. They go through such a journey and they change so much one by one by one. Each of them are fully, completely different people by the end of this trilogy.
yeah, and I think, and again, I was writing. It's the other thing when you write a book, you got to write a book with series potential. So I wrote "We Are the Dead." It's self-contained, but I was like, there is a series in this. The agent I had that let me go wrote to me, and he said, "Oh, how are you? I was thinking of you. What are you writing?" And I wrote back saying, "I'm working on this book. I really like it. This is the pitch. The war's over. The bad guys have won. What are you going to do about it?" And he wrote back saying, "I have to read that." So,
Yeah.
so I literally sent it to him. Didn't send it to anyone else. He signed me. We worked on it a bit for about 6 months together. The whole beginning section of the actual invasion wasn't in my original draft, and it was like,
Really?
yeah. So it started off with Tinstra trying to buy bread, while it's already
So you
occupied.
really started in the
Yeah,
occupation. Yeah.
and he was like, "We have to see before,"
Mm-hmm.
and that was completely the right decision on his part. Yeah, and then we sent it off to publishers, and we had a nice little auction, and it got picked up very quickly. So it was quite a ride. But then obviously you have to then work out what the other books are. And originally I wanted to do a 5 book series, right? And I was kind of thinking, well, World War II was 5 years, so it'd be a book
Mm-hmm.
a year if we did it like that. And no one's going to sign a debut author on a 5 book story, and they're like, "That's great, but do a trilogy." So that's why the books get bigger and bigger as it goes along,
Yeah.
right?
As you go along, they
I
do get bigger
essentially
and
wrote
bigger.
5 books and squeezed it into
Into
3.
three.
But yeah, it was again, what's that arc that you're going to go on from beginning to end? So
Mm-hmm.
someone like Yaz, she starts off, she's got no agency, she's a real nobody, and then what happens when she gets a bit of power, and how do we react to that? And we all know people that have been promoted in their jobs and suddenly become this, like, you're going to do what I want you to do, and how far we can push it. So I'm really proud of the journeys that they've all gone over the 3 books.
Yeah, it is. It is one of the most striking things about the trilogy is the journey these characters go on and how changed they are for living through the times they're living through, which again is something I think a lot of us can recognize
Yeah.
in ourselves, just in everyday life. So let me ask you this. Now, I know as a writer, you're going to know the old saying of you got to kill your darlings. And you Mike Shackle, I think more than a lot of other writers I've read recently will put these characters through the meat grinder. Like, you are not afraid to put the thumb screws and mash on these characters to make sure they are changed and reformed by the end. Is that something that you revel in? Do you just feel like it's part of the craft? I mean, is because you succeed very well at killing your darlings.
Again, I just wanted to make it real. I've got a piece of comic art on my wall from a series called Queen and Country by Greg Rucka and various other artists. And the page I've got, the main character is running away. She's being shot. And she said, it's not the bullet with your name on you have to worry about. It's all those that are marked to whom it may concern. Right?
That's a great line.
Which is a great line. So that
a great line.
When I was at college, I was doing army part-time, and I was being trained to do this stuff. And I remember going paintballing with some friends. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I've just been, and I was running along and I just got shot. And I didn't know where this had come from, but and I was doing everything that I'd been taught to stay safe, but a bullet found me. And again, in this, if I wanted it to be real, it was like you could be running along and a bullet could find you, and that's it. So, it was literally, if it comes up and the story demands it, you're dead. I mean, my poor old father.
I mean, when I talk about killing your darlings, not only dead, but I just mean, the experiences. The life-altering, soul-changing experiences that you put these people through. Obviously, it's an occupied city. Obviously, it's the themes about the dangers of fanaticism. I mean, there's going to be tough times, but boy, you go there.
Yeah, but I think that's what makes it interesting, really, isn't it? That's why I mean, that's the whole thing about writing is create people you like and put them through hell.
Yeah, that's it. Just a quick break in the action to thank all of our correspondents, directors, and producers on Patreon. These people keep the lights on. They make decisions for us because we don't know what we're doing. We're not great at making the decisions around here. The decisions all the way from what I'm going to read next, what the book club of the month Patreon pick is going to be, but all the way up to video ideas and what we're going to do here on the channel coming up for you. If you're interested or you want to find out how you can be a part of this, right down there in the description box, click the Patreon link. It's got all the answers for you. And once again, thank you to all of these fine people that are helping us build the channel, our correspondents, directors, and producers. The other thing that we brought up a couple times, and I mean, no secret about it, look right behind you. You love comics.
Yep.
I love comics. Longtime comic fanatic. More of a DC guy, but all comics, I love them,
yep.
Right? So you mentioned a little bit about some of your villains. Talk to me about being a comics lover, coming from that world, and how that impacts creating a villain. Because I definitely see some parallels loving comics. And when I'm reading a Mike Shackle villain, it's like, oh man, this villain would do great in a four color world.
Yeah. I basically steal ideas from everyone, or and I read and watch a lot. And there was someone was talking about Batman, and I think it might have been after the Joker film came out, which I hated. I don't really want to see how the bad guy became the bad guy. The Joker's best when he's a force of nature.
Absolutely.
And he acts as the complete opposite of Batman, who's all about control, all about, he's got his rules, his boundaries, and everything else. And the Joker's this chaotic force of nature that makes him interesting. The same as Darth Vader is fantastic because he's this black, evil mystery. And Luke Skywalker's, the blonde, blue-eyed guy in his little white outfit. And they're about as opposite as they can get. And to be honest, the moment Anakin was an orphan and his mum died and his girlfriend didn't love him enough, or you steal a lot of this monster coming through the door, and that's really what I go for with my bad guys, I just want them to be this, oh my God, look who's turned up. I'm now going to wet myself in fear because, and how am I going to deal with this flying demons dropping bombs on me and things like that? So
yeah.
that's where it all came from, and I'm not the kind of person that really wants to describe magic in all its detail as if it's a science equation, right? I have an iPhone. I know what it does, but I don't know how it does it.
Sure.
And that's my idea on magic, right? I want to know what it does and what it can't do, but I don't really need to get into, the whatever it is. And it's like the force as well. It's like the moment you start talking about the little atoms, whatever they were called, it's like
the metachlorine, all that.
It's just like, I just want, be able
I
to
don't
read
care.
people's minds and move objects and stuff like that. So yeah, that's where it all comes. But yeah, comics run through everything, and I'm writing something at the moment which I just keep describing as Batman with swords and magic. So
I've heard you talk about this before, and I hope it's going well because I need that book in my life.
It's not. It's driving me mad.
Oh no, I don't want to hear that.
No, I've written it like 3 times so far, and I'm not happy with it. But I'm a very instinctive writer, and I'm very bad at planning. So a lot of time I need to make something to know what's working, to pull back and shift it in the right way. But it is coming along, and I'm happy with where it's going now. So
okay, wonderful. That's what I want to hear. Okay, so look, we are simpatico, my friend. I love Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker. I think that is almost perfection for me because every time he describes his origin story or where he comes from, it's different.
Yeah.
And you can't know the origin. That doesn't matter.
And every time you hear it, it scares the crap out of you.
It scares you wet yourself.
Yeah.
But it's probably not true. That's not the point.
Yeah. But that's where when Batman comes through the window, that's the relief, right? You like, I don't want to sit there feeling, oh, I'm really sorry, and your mum didn't hug you enough, and it's like Alien coming through the spaceship, right? You just I just need to run now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It's the primal reactions. Yeah, I see that. And like you were saying, Luke Skywalker's the hero again, and that's youth, untapped potential. And you get that gravity and age, even though you don't see the face of Vader, you get that. It's like there's so many different dichotomies working in your work as well. And I kind of want to circle back to something you had talked about. When you initially wrote this, you started it with Tinster in a breadline. You did not start with the crashing over the wall of the invasion, that we do have in the beginning. And no spoilers, folks. That's literally the first couple pages. Like this kicks off like no series I've seen kick off. Like you dunk us into the deep end right away. And you set up a promise and you set up an idea of pace that is unrelenting in the very beginning, and you keep to that promise. It does not let up. I want to talk a little bit about that and the compression. All of this seems to move very linearly and happen very quickly, and there's a compression of it. Almost is like watching an episode of 24. I mean, you just have to keep turning pages because it's just one shoe keeps falling one after the other, right? And you say you don't plan a lot, but was that type of linear movement through this kind of a plan?
It's quite funny you mentioned 24, because after we sold it to Glance, my editor at the time, he said, have you thought about writing this like 24, where instead of it being a viewpoint per chapter, it's like everyone's in every chapter, but we do it by time, because it takes place over some days.
Right.
And I just went, that would drive me insane.
That would be too much.
And then I started thinking about the other books and trying to maintain that. And that just, I didn't want to do it. But it's funny, I was talking to Anna Smith Spark last year about her writing. I love how eloquent she is and how beautiful she can write. And I could read.
I have not read her yet. I have to get.
It's like poetry, but I could read her talking about the wind blowing through grass for 10 pages because you're just lost in the words and how
Mm-hmm.
eloquent she is. And I'm just not that kind of writer. She's a very visible writer where the words are the pleasure, whereas I write in a way to tell a story and drag you through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that automatically makes my books a bit faster. And maybe it's the ADHD in me or whatever, but I don't want to get bored. And I know when I start, I've been reading books and I want to skip stuff. But I just wanted to leave every chapter with I have to find out what happens next.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're pacey, so you can, that one more chapter becomes quite an easy thing to do. And I saw a video once where someone was saying about how I write. He goes, Mike Shackle's chapters are really short. Look, they're only, and he started counting it. It was like, oh, they're about 12 or 15 pages. They're actually
Yeah.
quite long, but they just drag you
But they
through.
don't feel
Yeah.
that. Yeah, they don't feel it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's because you're living through these characters almost in real time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a series of days
Yeah.
and the pace is unrelenting. And what happens in those series of days, again, just will take you through an emotional meat grinder. It's just unrelenting.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if that would, and when you say you're not a planner, it just amazed me.
When I say I'm not a planner, I know where I want to go. I knew the book well, in the end, the book started with the invasion, but it started off with Tinstra being lost and trying to survive and buy food. And then by the end of it, and she's going to get dragged into this saving the princess
Sure.
caper. And I knew where it had to end. But suddenly characters were coming to me, to counterbalance things. And these different stories were all happening. And I wasn't really planning it, except I knew I wanted them all to get to a certain place by the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is where the magic in writing happens, because it's not like I'm dictating it. I'm literally watching it and just writing down what's happening. And in book 2, as a character who appears halfway through, and I didn't know they were going to appear.
Really?
As Tinstra turned a corner and she bumps into this person, that was a shock to me that they were standing there.
What kind of fun is that? Like, what was that moment? I mean, that had to just be great.
Yeah, no, it's and that's where I thank the universe and everyone, wherever these stories come from. But I just think if I'm enjoying it, if I'm being surprised, other people will be surprised as well. So really, I write them for me and my own entertainment, and hope everyone else is into the kind of things that I am.
Well, I certainly am. There's what I love about it is you set that standard up as far as pace and the linear movement of it. And then we hit book 2. Something happens in book 2. And I'm just going to say it's a dramatic device you use, very dramatic. And I was wondering, I mean, this is a sprawling, dark fantasy epic. And I'm wondering, it's like, I feel like we need more canvas. I feel like we need more space and time to tell the story. How is he going to possibly do this? And then in book 2, you use a dramatic device that it's like we just go into IMAX. Everything becomes expanded. Was that something you had planned, or was that something that you just found you had to necessarily drop it in?
Yes and no. Yes, it was planned, and no, it wasn't. There was a character in book 1 who I needed to change quite dramatically.
Right. Yeah.
And originally the idea was she was going to be put in a chamber and they were going to magic her and stuff like that. And that just felt a bit boring. And again, the in book 1, there are these chambers where people can teleport effectively from one place to another. And that was, again, another idea from my agent, because he was like, they're traveling the length of this country and you've done it in 5 days and no one can move that quickly on foot or a horse. So how they, so that, and that's where collaboration is brilliant in this process, because you need people that you can throw ideas across like that. And so I suddenly had the chambers. And then once you're teleporting from one place to another, you go, well, actually, does that mean we could, do other things as well? So the moment I started thinking that, and then you're like, okay, well, if they do that, then, and it all just sort of clicks through. I must admit, I'm not sure if I'd ever use that technique ever again, because trying to then keep the different timelines together and things like
Sure.
that was seriously, there were moments where I'm like, I'm a fool. Why have I done this? This is just making my life
I've lost
hell.
myself.
Yeah. And I had all these sort of postcards all over the wall trying to place where everyone was and what was going on.
Let me. I love it so much more than, and it's so interesting to me to finally get to talk to you and hear what some of these ideas and how they distill down to what finally ends up into a trilogy that just struck me so well and that I appreciate and love so much. I love the fact that we get what we get as opposed to the chambers, because the chambers are something that's quick. And what we do get allows us that canvas and that space of time for a character to really move on a journey and be changed, impacted, uh, roughed up,
Mm.
And come to the other side. It gives them that moment, that capability to do that. That's why I appreciate where you ended.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I love writing Tinstra so much is she always does the right thing, but the wrong way about it.
Yeah,
She's always after a
yeah.
shortcut, and she's always, it's cheating in a way. It's a bit like the old Lance Armstrong thing. You cheat to win a championship because you don't think you're good enough. And then you have to keep cheating to maintain that level, and you're taking the adoration, and yet deep down you're going, I'm a cheat, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And with Tinstra, I don't think she ever really believes she earned any of her success through that. So she's always looking for a crutch to get her through.
Yeah.
And it takes her down a dark place, right? Because in the end, she's only got her anger to sustain her. And again, I've met plenty of people like that. Life's been tough.
I was just going to say that again, that streak of realism through. I mean, these aren't archetype or iconic characters that wear a white hat or a black hat. I mean, they're very complicated people in very complicated times.
Yeah, but in her heart, she loves the people she loves, and she'd do anything for them. And
yeah, to a fault, to an absolute fault. Okay, I have to bring this up, and I'm going to bring it up in a way that again is spoiler free, and I'm going to pay you the biggest compliment I can possibly pay to you.
Okay, thank you.
When I was working as an artistic director for a theater company, and we were choosing a season and putting things together, the kiss of death for us would always be to prejudge your audience. If you start looking at shows and think, well, I don't think they're quite ready for this, we're going to have people walk out of that. We're going to, and we always lived by the saying, the audience is always 3 steps ahead of you. Don't prejudge your audience. There's characters at the end of this trilogy that have been through such a ride and have changed so much that you give endings that you allow your audience to not only prejudge, but almost go on their own journey. They're satisfy that need for an ending. You almost allow them to do this in a way that I thought was unbelievable adherence to that rule of never prejudge your audience and let a character be who they are and just put it out there. And it's like Chekhov said, it's over when I say it's over, no matter, and I know you know what I'm talking about. Talk to me about working within those parameters. Was that always something you wanted to get to and do?
Yeah, because we all go on and carry on living. You can have friends in your life that you could be very close to, and they're in your life for a moment, and then we go our separate ways, right? So I yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? There are a couple of characters that people got in touch with. There's a character in book 2 called Mation, who was a soldier for the bad guys. And people kept saying, oh, why isn't he in book 3? And it's like, well, and I had to, again, be true to they had to be involved in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is obviously what happens to Yaz, the single mother, at the end. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and to be honest, I left it open enough. But everyone deep down knows what happens to her.
It depends who you are deep down as to what happens. That's what I love,
no,
Mike. That's what I love.
if you read my books, you know it's not going to be a happy ending. So, but everyone kept writing me going, I've got to know what happened.
Yeah.
My answer was, well, you know, but you can believe what you want. It's fine. But I actually ended up writing a short story that it was originally for an anthology, and I didn't use it with them in the end. And if people want to read it, it's on my website, and it's $1.29 Canadian if you want to buy it. And it clears up what happens to Yaz.
Okay, what is your website? I'm going to make sure we put it down there in the description for anyone that's looking for it.
It's mikeshackle.co.uk.
Okay.
And I'll send it to you afterwards. But someone read it and went, "Oh my God, I'm so happy to have read this, but I wish I hadn't."
Be careful what you wish for.
And it's like, okay, well, you know, and it is probably one of the darkest things I've ever written.
I would have to be. It would have to
but
be.
yeah, I mean, it's just it's like Tin Street. You don't know, you know. I'm not going to spoil that. Maybe she lives, maybe she doesn't. But
there's so many characters that follow that Chekhovian rule. Like at the end, you get to see through the window into this reality for a finite amount of time.
Yeah.
And when the story is over, the story is over. That doesn't mean these people's lives are over.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. The lives are so realized and three-dimensional. The characters, the shadows continue to play upon the cave's wall of your mind, right? Like that's when you know you've kind of hit it out of the park, Mike.
So my father normally reads everything I write before anyone else. And he's very supportive, but sometimes he reads a bit too quickly and doesn't actually take in everything. But when he read We Are the Dead, he rang me up about halfway through, probably when Darius made his first appearance. And he was like, "Are you okay? Is there anything you need to talk to me about? You know, what's on your mind? You know,
should I be worried about you?"
But then as I was writing the final book, he was just like, "It is going to be a happy ending. Please tell me it's a happy ending." And I'm like, well, you know, what do you call happy? It's, you know, there's an ending. And but yeah, I mean, it's again, it was just, no one is safe if they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, that's it.
And again, that's real life.
Yeah.
I mean, no one gets out alive. That's just the way
completely.
it is. You know. Okay, so let me ask before we run out of time. I'm watching the clock because you were so kind to give me this time, Mike. Thank you so
real
much.
Real pleasure.
I want to ask you what you're working on. Is there anything else? You mentioned a little bit.
Yeah.
The Batman type story. Are there other things, other irons in the fire, or is your full attention on that?
And again, maybe this is the ADHD in me. I'm writing a serial that's going up on my website. There's a new short story every month called The Witchfinder Chronicles.
What now? What if I could just ask real quickly? And again, we'll have the website down there in the description, guys, if you want to read what's new coming out from Mike Shackle. But why is this not in a book on the shelf of every bookstore out there?
Mainly because I'm still writing it. It's not finished.
Okay, you're still working through it.
It's a 12-part series. And again, I wrote the same anthology that I wrote the Yaz short story for. I wrote the Yaz short story, and I just thought, actually, as a standalone story, if you haven't read my books, you're going to go, what the hell, who is this and what's it about? So I then wrote another story called What Evil Lurks, and I set it in Elizabethan England just to try and take shortcuts with the world building, right? I only had 10,000 words or whatever it was. Maybe it was 7,000 words at a time. So how can I do something that's going to be quick, people can get into it and understand?
We got a frame of reference.
And everyone
Let's
knows
go.
Elizabethan England, Freddie Collars,
sure,
and all that kind of stuff. And then I wrote this short story, and I really loved it. And then the people who were doing the anthology told me there was a theme to the anthology, which they hadn't mentioned before, and this story wasn't right for the theme. And they're like, no, we'll still publish it. I went, but you can't say this book is
Yeah.
about this, and then my story comes along. So I pulled it out, but I really loved the character, and I loved the setting, and it was just fun to write. So I then thought, well, why don't I do a new story every month as a challenge to me? I'll put it on my website. It'll be like a TV show. Instead of watching a 3-hour epic movie, you can come along, watch an hour's entertainment, and have fun. So each story is self-contained, but there's this ongoing bigger story running through them. And I just like the idea of doing it. And I wrote another one. And I'm stealing stuff from Shakespeare, from Arthurian legend. All the monsters are from British myths, so they're
Oh,
you
nice.
can Google them and they'll come up. So again, I'm just trying to draw all this stuff and just have fun writing this kind of monster of the week tale. And I'm doing all the artwork for the covers and everything else.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
it's a real labor of love for me. The plan is when the 12 episodes are finished to collect them in a box set, again, like you do with your TV shows. And that I will publish. I'll either do it through Kickstarter or there is a publisher that I've been speaking to, but it will only exist in a limited edition hardback for that one time, and then that'll be it.
Okay.
But yeah,
Well, I'm definitely looking for that.
so that's that. I'm doing that. I also write detective novels under a pen name of Michael Dillon,
Okay.
which is
Did not know that.
about a detective in London tracking down serial killers, and I'm working on the 5th book in that series at the moment. I've written an espionage spy thriller that will be coming out in the summer again under the Michael Dillon name. So I've got lots of different stuff going on.
You're like an international man of mystery, Mike. You got all kinds of you're all over the
Yeah,
place. I had no
yeah.
idea, my friend. That's amazing.
So, and I'm illustrating a kids' book as well for someone at the moment. So, I have lots of things going on.
That is too cool. Well, everyone from here, you should all go to
.co.uk.
.co.uk to check out these things. And I'm telling you, man, I think you were talking with Mike when you talked about the Batman and the sword and sorcery and the magic thing. And it's like, I need that in my life. I hope it's going well.
It's been, there've been challenges in it because the first time I started writing it, I got up to about 90,000 words, and I wasn't even at
it's a good
I
chunk.
wasn't even at the halfway point in the story. And the realities of traditional publishing now, they don't want books more than 130, 150,000 words max.
If I can just ask, and I know we're running long on time, but how does that work for a genre that's generally needs a bit more space and time to build a whole world
it
and
makes
characters?
It very difficult.
Yeah.
And I'm about to lose my voice, so if I get all croaky, I'll apologize. But it's just the realities, until the last, excuse me, it was 220,000 words. And it cost so much to print. When they did the first run of the trade paperback, it sold out in 2 weeks, and they didn't do another print run. So it was essentially out of print for a year.
And that kills all momentum.
Which isn't very healthy. Paper costs a lot, and you've got to ship them around the world and everything else, and shelf space becomes difficult. And there are lots of real realities of business. So that's what stopped me at the first point. And then again, I if you're telling an origin story, I then started questioning the character that I'd come up with and whether I was being too easy on myself in where they started from, where they ended up. And I think if you like Drennan, the We Are the Dead stories, you would have liked that original character because he very much was a street thief that then becomes this all-powerful person.
Oh, so did you think you were just reaching back into your bag of tricks? You wanted to trick yourself?
It just felt too easy. But
Yeah,
again, there became a moment where that person would have to be trained up to become really good. And again, to do that well and make it believable, it takes up a huge amount of time.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
again, it's as you write the story, you almost hit this challenge. You go, okay, I now need to solve this problem, but to solve that, it might mean going back and redoing other things. So it has been very much that kind of series of challenges. But they're huge chunks of it written. I love the world. I love the characters in it all. But there's been this kind of almost academic putting the jigsaw pieces in the right place, so that when
Sure.
you get to the end, you go, "Wow, that was worth it."
Hmm.
All in 130,000 words.
Yeah, there. Some heavy
Yeah.
lifting there for you.
And again,
Okay.
but that's a lot of the fun in it is and again, how can you keep that pace? How can you tell the story? Because the danger is when you do write epic fantasy, you can waffle on, and you can almost say, well, readers want big chunky books. But I know myself, I have very little time to read now. So
Yeah.
the thought of sitting down with something that's massive, that if I'm not already committed to that world, it becomes a big question
It's
to take on.
sure. Well, I do. I understand all the real world reasons, but at the same time, it makes me a little,
Yeah.
that cross section of where art and business hit. That it's always just
Yeah.
it
Oh
just
no.
gives me an oogie feeling.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand. But Mike Shackle, I know I saw you put the
No, no,
lozenge. I know
sorry.
you're struggling with. Yeah, no. That's
Yeah.
totally fine. I just don't want to. I don't want to keep you any longer. We've been going for an hour, and I truly, truly appreciate your time. I truly appreciate your work. I'm going to mikeshackle.co.uk. You should too. If you're a fan of this, let's all check out what
Um,
the other side of the Yaz story. And then if you just want to try a little bit of Mike
yeah.
Shackle, it sounds like there's some episodic things you can just try right there on
And
the
they're
website.
all super cheap, so less than the price of a coffee. So check them out, everyone.
You can't beat it, man. Mike Shackle, thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
All of you, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time on Talking Story.
Amazing. Thank you very much.